You have spent years becoming effective, building the skills, the authority, the forward momentum that the culture defines as success. And somewhere in the accumulation, you have begun to notice a cost that the success literature never warned you about. The more you optimize, the more you manage, the more you lead and push and produce, the further you feel from something you cannot quite name, a quality of being that the striving keeps moving you away from rather than toward. Lao Zi wrote about this problem 2,500 years ago. He called what you are moving away from the Tao, the way of things, the natural current of the universe. And he said the solution is not to try harder, it is to try differently, to stop forcing what cannot be forced, to lead without dominating, to act without straining, and to carry, as the foundation of everything, three treasures that the world consistently undervalues and that Lao Zi consistently said were more powerful than any amount of ambition or force: compassion, frugality, and the courage not to be first. These are not the three virtues that the culture of achievement celebrates. They are in many ways the opposite: compassion over conquest, frugality over accumulation, the courage not to lead over the relentless forward press. Lao Zi is not offering consolation prizes for people who failed to acquire the standard goods. He is making the precise, philosophically serious argument that these three qualities are the source of genuine strength, and that the world's preferred alternatives, pursued without them, produce a specific, documentable kind of ruin. The first treasure is compassion. In Chinese, Tzi, sometimes translated as loving kindness, mother love, the tenderness of a parent for a child. Not sentiment, not the soft emotion that the culture of hardness has learned to dismiss as weakness. The specific, structural, load-bearing quality of a person whose concern for others is genuine enough to change how they act. Lao Zi says, from compassion comes courage. This is the reversal that requires sitting with. The culture says courage comes from strength, from the hard self, the disciplined will, the person who has overcome their softness. Lao Zi says no. The person who acts from genuine concern for others is not afraid of what the defense of that concern will cost them. The mother who is not afraid for herself is afraid for her child, and that fear produces a courage that the self-interested calculation of risk and reward cannot produce. The leader who genuinely cares about the people they serve will do what the leader who is primarily concerned with their own position will not. Compassion is not a limitation on effective action, it is the source of the deepest effectiveness. The effectiveness that does not require force because it is already aligned with what the situation genuinely needs. The second treasure is frugality. In Chinese, jian, economy, restraint, the discipline of not taking more than what is needed. Again, the culture hears limitation. Lao Zi says, from frugality comes generosity. The person who has learned to live with less accumulates something more valuable than the person who has taken everything available: the capacity to give, the freedom from the anxiety of the person who needs the accumulation to keep growing in order to feel secure, the specific lightness of a person whose relationship to resources is grounded not in hoarding but in sufficiency, who knows what enough looks like and has the discipline to stop there. In the Taoist understanding, frugality is not poverty, it is the intelligent management of vital energy, not just money and possessions, but attention, effort, the force one brings to the world. The person who spends everything on every task has nothing left for the tasks that matter. The person who holds something in reserve, who does not exhaust themselves on what is unnecessary, arrives at the moment that requires everything with something still to give. The third treasure is the one that stops most readers: daring not to be first. In Chinese, 不敢为天下先.
The courage not to place yourself at the front of the world, not the timidity of the person who hangs back from cowardice, the specific, deliberate, philosophically grounded choice of the person who understands that the compulsion to lead, to be first, to be at the front, is itself a form of fear. Fear of being invisible, fear of irrelevance, fear that unless you are ahead of the others, you do not count. Lao Zi says, from daring not to be first comes leadership. Again, the reversal. The person who must be first cannot be trusted with leadership because their leadership serves their need to be first rather than the needs of what they are leading. The person who does not need to be first, who can step back, allow others to lead, follow when following is what the situation requires, this person, when they do step forward, does so because the situation genuinely calls for it, and the people around them know the difference. This is Wu Wei, non-forcing action applied to the specific domain of leadership and social position, not passivity, the discipline of not doing what the ego insists on doing, when what the situation actually needs is something quieter.
Now the bridge. Because Lao Zi was writing in 5th century BC China for an audience navigating a world of feudal states, Bronze Age politics, and Confucian social hierarchy, and most people watching this video are not. But here is what has not changed. The person who cannot lead without needing to be seen leading. The manager whose compassion is performed for the meeting rather than practiced in the difficult conversation. The professional whose frugality with attention, the willingness to stop, to leave space, to not fill every silence with their own voice, has been traded for the relentless forward press that the culture calls ambition. These are Lao Zi's problems wearing modern clothes, and the 3 treasures he is prescribing are still the 3 that the achieving culture undervalues and that the situations requiring genuine wisdom most need. The email sent with genuine care rather than managed for impression. The project approached with economy rather than the exhausting maximalism that produces burnout and indifferent results. The meeting in which you are willing to not be the person with the answer, to let someone else lead, to ask rather than tell, to create the space in which the better solution can arise rather than insisting on the solution you arrived with. These are not soft alternatives to effectiveness. They are, Lao Zi insists, the source of the deepest effectiveness available. The effectiveness that is not exhausting, that does not require force because it moves with the natural current of things rather than against it. Here is what Lao Zi asks of you, practically, today. First, find where you are acting without compassion and act from it instead. Not the compassion you perform, the genuine concern for the person across the table, for the people affected by the decision, for the long-term well-being of the situation rather than your short-term position within it. Ask before the next difficult action, is this what genuine concern for the people involved actually requires, or is this what my need to appear effective requires? The difference is often subtle. The answer is often uncomfortable, and the action that arises from the genuine concern is almost always more powerful and more sustainable than the action that arises from the management of appearances. Second, identify one place to practice frugality. Not financial austerity, though that may be part of it, the economy of attention. The conversation where you say less, the project where you do enough rather than everything. The day where you hold something in reserve rather than exhausting yourself in the first hours on what is not essential. Lao Zi's frugality is the discipline of not spending what you will need. It is the person who arrives at the moment that requires full presence with something still available to give, because they did not exhaust themselves on the moments that required only partial presence. Find one place today to practice the restraint that the culture calls underperformance and Lao Zi calls wisdom. Third, practice the courage not to be first.
In one situation today, the meeting, the conversation, the moment when the instinct is to step forward and provide the answer, practice the deliberate, courageous choice to step back, to let someone else speak first, to ask rather than tell, to create space rather than fill it. This is harder than it sounds for the person who has built their identity around effectiveness and expertise. It requires the specific courage Lao Zi describes, the courage of the person who does not need to be first, who can hold their knowledge and capacity lightly enough to let the situation develop before intervening, whose leadership, when it comes, arrives because it is genuinely needed rather than because the ego could not wait. Fourth, ask where you are forcing what cannot be forced. Wu Wei is not laziness, it is the disciplined sensitivity to the difference between the effort that works with the natural current of a situation and the effort that fights it. Most exhaustion is not the exhaustion of having done too much. It is the exhaustion of having forced what would have moved on its own, of having pushed where the situation was already going, resisted where the resistance served no one, insisted on a particular form when the content could have found a better one. Ask once today, where am I working against the current? Where is the effort costing more than the result is worth? Where would less force produce more movement? And then, just once, try the lighter touch. Trust the current. See what moves without being pushed. I want to close with the image from the Tao Te Ching that I keep returning to. Not the three treasures, the water. Lao Zi returns to water again and again, because water is the perfect embodiment of everything he is trying to say. Water is soft, it yields to every obstacle. It does not insist on its shape. It goes where it can go and does not force what it cannot force. And water, over time, carves the canyon. Water, without armor, dissolves the stone. Water, flowing always toward the lowest place, the place that ambition avoids, nourishes everything it touches and accumulates, eventually, into the sea. The three treasures are the philosophy of water applied to human life, the compassion that softens without weakening, the frugality that conserves without diminishing, the courage not to be first that yields without surrendering. None of these look like power from the outside. All of them produce, over time, the movement that force cannot. Lao Zi left civilization on a water buffalo and handed his wisdom to a border guard and disappeared. He did not need to be first. He did not exhaust himself on an audience. He gave what he had to the person who was there and trusted the current to carry it. 2,500 years later, it is still being carried. Here's the question Lao Zi leaves us with today. Of the three treasures, compassion, frugality, and the courage not to be first, which one is most absent from how you are currently moving through the world? Not in general, in the specific situation that is costing you the most right now, the relationship, the project, the professional context where the forcing is exhausting you and the results are not matching the effort. Which treasure would change how you are approaching it? Leave that in the comments, because naming which one you are missing is the beginning of the practice, and the practice, patient, soft, persistent as water, is how the canyon gets made. I'll see you in the next one.